Hey, what's up everybody, Commander Radix here bringing you another video. And today we're gonna do a little bit of a Commander Radix reacts to Commander Radix. By the way, as we continue through the video, please forgive the coughing. I think I'm settling down from some sort of fever, possibly flu situation, so I still haven't fully recovered from that, so I'm still coughing every now and then. And my voice might sound weird, I don't know, it sounds weird to me right now, but... So a few days ago, I came out with a video called Post-Anime Depression. Now, this is a little bit of a special video, an unusual video, because this video is actually 5 years old. It came out originally in April of 2020. Weren't those fun times, April of 2020. But when I made the video, and then I edited the video, and then I released the video was basically made, it's mostly a commentary, it's mostly really an essay that I wrote. The visuals don't really matter that much, so I just slapped a bunch of anime openings on the video and just made it faster, hoping that it would go through copyright detection. But it did not. It got banned in like every single United Nations member country the moment it was released, and so nobody has seen it. And it's been sitting in my YouTube studio for 5 years now, and I was thinking, you know what if I just what if I just blurred the parts that got copyright detection, which is like 90% of the video, and released the video anyway, because you know what, it's an essay. The video part of the video isn't actually that important. It wasn't really thought out, it was just sort of there so you can have something to look at. So that's why I blurred it out and I released it a few days ago, actually yesterday from my perspective of recording. I don't know when this video you're seeing right now is going to come out. But a lot has changed in the past 5 years, in my life in particular. Most especially the way I see the world. You guys know that I went through a complete conversion of how I see the world in those 5 years. What is that? There is a centipede on my wall. Anyway, where were we? So, most notably, the big change that happened in the past 5 years was that I converted basically from atheism, materialist, positivist, nihilistic atheism into Orthodox Christianity. And when you convert, you know, I think a lot of people don't really, unless you've gone through this process, you don't really know how jarring it is that everything you thought you knew about reality is completely wrong. It's the paradigm shift, as it were, is quite drastic, and it really changes how you see everything. And it might sound weird that, oh, Radix, you converted from atheism to Christianity. How could that have possibly affected the way you watch anime? And, brother, every possible way. Okay, so I wanted to sort of react to that video, that 5-year-old video, and sort of put some extra commentary on what I agree with now, what I disagree with now. So we're going to react, kind of, to that video of mine from 5 years ago, and add some tweaks. I should also add that I've produced a few more videos that sort of explain my view towards media and fiction in a better way. You can see my How to Be a Fan and Not a Consumer video. You can see my essays on Substack, especially from icons to Funko Pops and franchise fiction to slop pipeline. By the way, those 2 essays are going to be turned into a video soon. I'm almost finished editing that video, actually. But those videos will give you a more clearer idea of how I think of fiction and art in general these days. And this video right now is me sort of applying what I believe now to what I believed back in 2020, okay? This video isn't going to be super edited or anything because I don't think it's that important for the video. I kind of just wanted to get the video out there for anyone who's curious. And this video, despite being a 5-year-old video on a topic I haven't talked about in 5 years on this channel, even though, full disclosure, I do talk about anime on this channel, I just haven't talked about anime in 5 years. I think the last show I talked about was Kyokai no Kanata. I reviewed that show 5 years ago. You can see that on the channel. But we can talk about anime here. We can talk about, I'm sort of going through a process right now with my channel where I'm just kind of making videos on whatever I want to make. Because if I don't, then I just don't make videos. And that's a lose-lose for everyone. So I'm just kind of making videos on whatever I feel like making right now. Yeah, but let's go through this. Post-anime depression. Vroom, I already have it repaired. Look at me. Alright, so we start off with the disclaimer. The following video was released on April 18th, 2020. I know my camera's covering up the text, but you can see the video for yourself. It's the video I uploaded right before this video. Copyright led to the video being blocked immediately, shot from space, blasted to smithereens. It has never been seen by anyone since its release, besides me, right? I have finally, and I think this video was technically available for patrons back in 2020 because Patreon didn't block it. So if you were a patron back in 2020, you had access to this video. And I also think it might have been on my BitChute and Rumble or somewhere else before, but I don't remember. I have finally gotten around to editing the video, censoring the parts that led to the video being blocked. And the visual part isn't really important for this video, right? So it's okay that 90% of the video is actually blurred and censored. Over 5 years have passed since this video was made. My views and opinions have changed significantly since it was created. Right? For the sake of preservation, I will not alter or add anything said in the original video. I intend to make a video addressing what I disagree with in this video in the future. Hello, nice to meet you. That's this video we're doing right now. But for the time being, I hope you enjoy this heavily censored time capsule of 2020 Commander Radix. Alright, a classic. Let's go. When it comes to any form of media, a vast majority of it is crap. Okay, so the opening being blurred here is the Geijutsu Art Design School or something. It's an anime about making art. I thought it was fitting, so I put its opening here. But I think I agree with what I say in this original part, this beginning part, where most media, most art is crap, and I'm going to kind of talk about more details. I approached the topic from a different angle in my franchise fiction to slop pipeline, where I talk about why art made for profit tends to become crap over time. But I do agree with this statement I talk about here, where most art is crap because the very nature of art requires you to work hard on a skill, and so you start off being crap, and then you get better over time, and more people quit before they reach that finish line. So that all checks out. Most art is crap. Media is an art, and part of the point of art is working to improve your skills with your craft, as well as helping you understand yourself or something about the world in the process. Right. I kind of disagree with what I said the purpose of art is, or the purpose of engaging in art, the purpose of creating art. These days, a lot of my art philosophy, and when I made this video, I was heavily inspired by the YouTuber Digibro. I still am kind of inspired by Digibro by the fact that I'm still wearing the Digibro glasses, right? My philosophy to content making on this channel is also very Digibro-esque, especially Digibro After Dark. But Digibro was sort of a degenerate, decadent, pseudo-atheist thing. There's a lot that can be said about Digibro. My art philosophy these days is mostly shaped by, I guess, my worldview, how it's changed. I'm now an Orthodox Christian, and so I view art through a traditional Christian lens. That is what Jonathan Pajot talks about, what J.R.R. Tolkien talks about. They are sort of my two main pillars when it comes to my philosophy of art these days. Although Digibro still influences me in a few ways. I've kind of gone back and looked at what Digibro's philosophy of art was, and I've tried to reconcile that more closely with sort of a Christian outlook. But J.R.R. Tolkien and Jonathan Pajot I think are my main sources of inspiration when it comes to art creation, and C.S. Lewis. But the purpose of creating art is, Jonathan Pajot recently made a speech where he talked about the purpose of art should be for celebration, for participation, and for, let's say, edification. The word he used was enlightenment. But the J.R.R. Tolkien sort of talks about that we need to create to be human. We are human beings made in the image of God, and to be made in the image of God means to be made in the image of the Creator, and so we sub-create. That's what we do. That's the main function of a human, and to be something is to do what the function of that thing is, and so we create. We have that impetus to create. Then Pajot sort of adds, to what ends do we create? Well, we look at the Divine Liturgy as the Gesamtkunstwerk, as the sort of key, the highest of art that's holding all art together, that all art should be anchored in to some extent, to some degree. The art that we create needs to be participatory, it needs to build communion with those around us, it needs to be celebratory, it needs to be sort of positive. We don't want to be nihilist with our art. And then it needs to be edifying, enlightening. It needs to help us become more aware of the virtues. Not necessarily in a every story needs to end in a moral kind of way, but in a way that, we don't want like a whole black-pilled type, super negative piece of work that a lot of postmodernist art has, talking about how there is no meaning and stuff like that. Art should reveal to us the meaning, help others understand meaning. And so I agree with what I say in this video here about how art helps us understand the world better. I just think it needs to be a little bit more guided into in what way do we understand the world better. And I think, did I talk about something about yourself or something about the world in the process? I don't think you understand yourself through making art in so much as I used to think so. I think you learn more about yourself through different things. I think you learn more about yourself through a few things. That's mostly the key line through it all is through relationship. Through your relationship with others, through your relationship with God. Now, art can help facilitate that. It can be literally a medium, right? Medium is important in art. It can be a medium for that, so it can be incorporated into that, but I don't think the purpose of art is to help you understand more about yourself. Right. I think that covers that.
Out the world in the process. When one of the key points of art is improving, you have to understand the entirety of art exists upon a foundation of crap.
That's true.
And working to build up from there.
Right.
It is in the nature of time and reality for more people to start than they will reach the mythical finish line. It takes so much more effort to run a mile than it does taking one step, and because of this, there are a lot more...
The anime we have here is Guilty Crown, which is a pretty good anime. It gets a little bit weird towards the end, though.
People who start a skill, but significantly less few who really master their skill. It is the job of the consumer of...
Okay, here's where I have a disagreement. Alright, this sentence coming up here. It is the job of the consumer...
art to be able to discern what is and what isn't crap.
Okay.
Even if it means shifting through loads and loads of crap. The fact of the matter...
Probably should be sifting and not shifting, but whatever. Okay. It is the job of the consumer to discern what is and isn't crap, even if it means sifting through loads and loads of crap. Okay, I have a few, especially if you've looked at my How to Be a Fan and Not a Consumer video, and if you've read my franchise fiction to slop pipeline essay, you know that I disagree with this completely now. First of all, just in the wording. I use the word consumer, right? My philosophy of art these days is art does not exist to be consumed. You know, that's Jonathan Pajot talks about this in his recent talk, that a lot of the problems of postmodern art or modern art is that we've turned art into a product. When we separate art from its purposes of participation, of celebration, of enlightenment, when we separate it from that, it becomes a product. It becomes something to be consumed. It becomes a consumable. Pajot talks about how strange of an experience it must be to medieval Europeans if they learned that Europeans today, Europeans in the 1800s, 1700s, would go into a opera house to sit down and listen to opera and then leave. They would look at that as very, very strange. What was the purpose of that experience? To the medieval Europeans, music especially existed to sort of bring people together and to do things, right? You would have music at parties. You would sing music together as a group. You can look at how traditional churches were built, how their liturgy was designed, where the entire mass of people would be participating in the liturgy, where you would be singing the hymns, for example. It's something communal. It's something that's done in participatory nature. It's something done together as a group. And instruments can be sort of secondary to that. That's why we get sort of this almost a cappella-esque energy in the Orthodox Church, for example, where for the most part we don't typically have instruments used in our Eastern liturgies. Right, so but by disconnecting art from that, well, now it's just creating something, and maybe we might even have the enlightenment aspect to it. We might have the edifying aspect to it, that it has a good moral, but we've disconnected it from a participatory sort of context, which has turned art into a product. And so I disagree with engaging with art like that. So I disagree with the whole approach of art as a consumable. So I disagree with approaching art as a consumer like I follow in this video here. Also, it's the job of the consumer to sift through loads and loads of crap to find the good one. There is an implication in this argument, and that is that the individual has the responsibility to find good art in the first place. I do not think that is true. Especially if you've read my essays. If you've read my essays, you would know that I basically say we know what the good art is. The good art is the canon. The good art is, obviously you don't want to consume bad art. You want to have something, you want to take in something that's good for you, right? But first and foremost, I talk about the canon, I talk about scripture, from a Christian perspective, and I understand not everyone on this channel is Christian. That's your business. But from the Christian perspective, good art, first and foremost, is going to be the Holy Scriptures. It's going to be the hymns of the church. It's going to be the lives of the saints. It's going to be the literary tradition of the Christian tradition, right? That should have the hierarchy. I talk about how art, in my essays, I talk about how art is consumed in a hierarchy. And at the top of that hierarchy is going to be Scripture, okay? And the tradition of the church. But I also talk about how St. Basil the Great tells us, certain things to read, and we can read the greats, the classics, the texts that were definitive, the texts that were heavily referenced by future generations, because through the tempering of time, we know what is going to be good. We have a stronger inclination of what could be good and what could not be good. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it might be the most clearly relevant to us. That's why I disagree with the idea of cutting out modern art entirely. I do think modern art should be engaged with, and I kind of want to make more videos talking about that as well, why some forms of modern art we should engage with. It just needs to be within a hierarchy. That might be a topic of another video, but we have sort of that traditional canon. Now, it's when we get to more recent stuff where we are going to have to sift through things. But my philosophy at this point in time is very much what makes... This was Digibro's argument as well at the time, that what makes art good is ultimately going to be 100% subjective to the individual's experience of that work. I don't necessarily think that's true anymore. I think there are some things that make art good. I do think it's possible for the individual to see different participations in the good in art differently than other viewers of the same piece of art. I think that's possible. But I think it's not our job to sift through crap. Okay, we know what is good from the basic tradition, from the classics, from the scriptures, and then we can figure out what's good based on hearsay, based on review, especially on people we trust. I think something I bring up in my franchise fiction to slot pipeline video is talking about there's a mistake that we can really like a genre, or we can really like a trope or cliche, or we can really like a franchise, when really what we like is ultimately creators, and how once we find a creator we like, we should find different works by that same creator that we could possibly like. If you like the science fiction genre, for example, but you really like a science fiction book by one writer, but there's a whole lot of other science fiction crap that's out there, right? Why don't you just check out what other books that writer wrote, even if it's not in the science fiction genre? And I'm kind of going to bring up 2020 Radix is going to bring up a counterpoint to that, sort of in this video. But that's sort of my approach to art consumption, art appreciation these days. I don't think it's the responsibility to sift through loads and loads of crap anymore. Oh, I'm dying. There's more I could probably say on this, but I think I've said enough so far. I thought this video was going to be like maybe 10 minutes, but then I think this is going to be a long video actually, so we'll see how that goes.
The fact of the matter is, for people like the discerning consumer, shifting through the bad is worth it when you find the diamond in the rough.
And again, that comes from my philosophy of only you will know what's good. Only you will know the diamond in the rough. And because only you can know, you can't rely on other reviews or recommendations. You have to, or tradition, right? You have to go through it all yourself. And I fundamentally disagree with that framework.
Like any other media or art form, anime is mostly crap.
That's true.
Piles and piles of cynical work coming from a country with a dying economy, but the need for expression can reach the sky with trash, with stories made to catch an audience, and just continue forever, because the possibility of striking gold again is nearly impossible. And
that's true. I've been saying this from the beginning. I've been saying things like this since 2015, I think, or 2016, about how one of my big problems with comic series is that it will never end, and that good stories, by definition, need to have a beginning, middle, and end. And if an ongoing series starts to get good, then it starts to get money, then the writer starts to rely on it for income, and then they start working on that, they start drawing it out, and then that good story becomes a crap story. Because a story requires pacing, it requires a beginning, middle, and end, right? And by the way, the blurred opening here is a Tokyo Ghoul opening. Yeah, that's something I still agree with. And it's why I don't... If you read my franchise fiction to slot pipeline video, or essay, which will become a video, I talk about how we should approach things like that. If you're a Batman fan, for example, how do you approach Batman comics? Do you just start reading the Batman comics? No. You're going to find the key, good, self-contained story arcs, and basically hold on to that and create your own canon from there. Do not give in to the whole marketing scheme that is the shared universe or the official canon, because that's not real. That doesn't exist. You can create your own canon, and I recommend that you should. And of course, you hear people talk about why they don't read Western comics anymore. They read manga because manga has more continuity between issues. It has beginning, middle, and end usually, even though there are a lot of manga that are drawn out. It's why I don't watch One Piece, for example. And I think I talk about in this video why only watch shorter anime, for example. That's true. Contained stories are better than long, drawn-out stories. Yeah.
This prolonged longevity of the show will often be at its disadvantage the longer the show goes on, packed to the brim with filler that is appealing only to the casual viewer just tuning in, or those who have simply grown so attached to certain characters they could spend years worth of watch time just to see that character do literally anything.
Yep.
That form of show has its purpose and can even be applied to what I'm going to be talking about here today, but I want to make a point from my own perspective. I go out of my way to find shows of a much shorter length to get more bang for my hour. After all, time is money, and I'm one of those people who think about everything they could be doing that would be more productive if I wasn't just sitting there mindlessly watching YouTube or playing a game by myself.
Okay, so the sort of idea I just expressed there is going to become a psychological problem for me that I will suffer for the next 5 years. The idea that when I watch an anime, I feel like I'm wasting time. If I'm watching YouTube, if I'm watching anime, if I'm playing a game, I feel like I'm wasting time and I'm not spending it productively. That was another sort of mindset I had, especially as an atheist materialist. One of the things I've been trying to learn the past 3 or so years has been how to spend time, and not how to spend time in a sort of, what's the word? Spending your time constantly productively isn't actually a good use of time. Maybe I should make a video about that later, but you need to be able to sit in silence, for example. One of the most important things you can do, or you should do in life, is one that doesn't really have any material effect. In Christianity, we have the idea of the prayer rule. The idea that we have morning prayers, we have evening prayers, we have afternoon prayers, we have time for the Jesus prayer, escapism. We have time where we just sit with our prayer ropes and say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Over and over and over for, depending on how long you're, beginners for a shorter time. As you go on through the life of the church, it's going to be longer. We have the Divine Liturgy on Sunday, where we stand for like 2 hours. And these things do not have an immediately visible, productive quality to them. They exist so that we can be at peace with ourselves and with God, right? There's a lot that can be said about the value of a prayer rule. There's also value in play. Thomas Aquinas talks about a person who's always serious and never spends time just playing, doesn't spend any time just chilling, doesn't spend time having fun. Ultimately, it's not gonna work well for him in the end of the day. He talks about how the cultivation of virtue requires you to be able to spend time not doing anything. Not anything that just seems productive. So there's this attitude I'm expressing here in this video that I see now that's going to grow to become a bigger mental health problem in my life. And I just wanted to point that out, that's a big problem, what I just said here. I disagree with that idea entirely. There is value to maybe not mindlessly watching YouTube. That's one thing. You can be more mindful about the content you watch on YouTube. I definitely was watching YouTube way too much at that time. But playing a game by yourself or watching anime is not as bad and as much of a waste of time as I thought of it then. It all really comes down to everything being ordered correctly, everything receiving its correct amount of time and attention. But cutting it out entirely is not a good option.
I can't bring myself to watch any anime longer than 25 episodes at the most.
That's still true, though.
But if
That's
I
still a
do
good
go beyond
idea.
that, it has to be a very dense show.
And we have
So
Code
now that I've
Geass here.
limited
I
my
love
scope,
Code Geass' favorite
I still
anime.
have to shift through the crap like corporate light novel adaptation of this.
And here I go. I still have to sift through crap like the corporate light novel adaptation of the season or whatever. Radix, 2020 Radix, you don't gotta. You don't have to do that, buddy. You don't have to. There are more things in life than watching anime, right? And that's another key difference between 2020 Radix and 2025 Radix in our approach to content, in our approach to art, in our approach to media. 2020 Radix basically is looking at consumption of media as the purpose for life. That you are a husk. You exist just to be entertained. You know, this whole life is just a loading lobby that you're spending all your time waiting until death, I guess. And you're filling in the time by just watching anime and shows and all that jazz. And that's not how I see how I see art anymore. You know, as a nihilist, as a materialist atheist, you know, you have a hole inside you, and you want to try to, you know, a god-sized hole, and you're trying to fill that hole with whatever you can. And I mentioned in my franchise fiction to slop pipeline essay that when man is an atheist, when they don't have a connection to God, when they don't have a connection to the transcendent, I love how my voice is cracking here in 2025 just as it's cracking in 2020. But when you don't have that connection to God, you try to fill that up. The next best thing to God, if you can call it that, you know, if you subtract 1 from infinity, right, the next best thing is art. Art is going to be the next thing that can approach the transcendental. Music, art, visual art, sculpture, performance, drama, storytelling, things like that. Poetry. That's probably the most transcendental thing we have besides God. But it is not God. And if you try to use that, and people will try to use that to fill in the God-sized hole, it's just going to fall into the hole, an infinite-sized hole, and never fill it up, right? So, you know, this is where you get people whose whole identity is their fandom, right? Their whole identity is seated, their whole self-worth even is seated in being a fan of a particular group, of a particular franchise, of a particular company, of a particular brand, right? They basically try to fill that communion with God, the communion with the transcendental, with material things, and that doesn't work in the long run. But the way I'm talking about art here, especially anime, is that it's my entertainment to try to fill the gap, right? And that's not going to be as... Someone going through this scenario isn't going to be as cognizant of that fact during that moment, right? If you went to me in 2020 and told me that I watch anime because I'm trying to fill in a god-sized hole, I would look at you like you're retarded. But, you know, it's not to say that you become Christian, you commune with the transcendental, right? And now you don't need that anymore. That's not the right path either, right? Once you have that God-sized hole filled with what only can fill that size, which is God, then everything else, it's not this like weird Puritan type thing where all you need is God, everything else is unnecessary, so we aren't going to do that, right? It's more like, now that I am full, now that I have fully become human, I can participate and bring God to these different things in a way that I couldn't before, more fully than I could before. God created Adam, and Adam was set to work naming the animals, right? Helping to keep the garden, right? The world and its fruits were created for mankind to have control over, to enjoy, with the communion of God, right? It's not like God created Adam just floating in space and said, all you need is me, right? He created a world for us to enjoy, and that includes art. Art is fruit of fellow mankind, right? And we can enjoy that even more fully. I don't really have enough time to get into the details about what I mean by that. It's sort of like a if you know, you know type situation. But the way you consume art, the way I consume art, I don't like that wording, the way I appreciate art these days isn't so much like I have to watch this show, I have to watch this show. It's, okay, here is a piece of art that is highly regarded for, you know, valid reasons. Let me look at it. What can I participate in? What is this celebrating? How can I learn from this? What Does this teach me about human nature? What does this tell me about myself? What does this tell me about the world? In a good way, right? In a way that's edifying, in a way that builds me up, right? Or can help me help others, right? That's sort of the idea of what art is for. And it can also be entertainment. There's no problem with entertainment as long as it's in the right order, right? And I sort of bring this up in my essay, that we can be less picky when it comes to entertainment, and corporations, for example, take advantage of that, and they make our entertainment lower quality. I talk about the whole high art, low art distinction in that essay, and how they don't really reflect quality in so much as they reflect mindset and the approach to art. And that, well, look at my essay for that. The video version will come out soon. What was I talking about? Yeah, how I approach art differently. I appreciate art much more differently. I find myself rewatching shows, rereading books that I watched and read as an atheist, now looking at it through a Christian lens and enjoying it so much more. I'm able to connect the archetypes. I'm able to analyze the story a little bit better. I'm able to predict the way stories are going to end much better than I used to be when I became a Christian versus being an atheist, especially if you have a sort of symbolic lens of reality. This is where Jonathan Pajot really comes in handy. If you really understand symbolism through a Christian lens, you can kind of predict the way what characters are going to do what problems are going to pop up and how those problems are going to be resolved. You can kind of tell eventually once you understand the patterns of storytellings through Christian archetypes. But that's a whole nother can of worms that I don't have enough time to talk about in this video about post-anime depression. Okay.
Season, or a show with a read the manga ending, and this limits the range of
Yeah, read the manga endings are so bad.
shows I like to a much smaller portion.
Right, it's a good idea to limit the amount of show. You should have those filters, right? Those filters aren't necessary. And I guess my filters have kind of become more narrow in some ways and more broad in other ways than they used to be. That's interesting.
And then, every now and then, you do find that diamond in the rough. A show that exceeds all your expectations with lovable characters and a plot that explores interesting themes thoroughly, or in some cases, even just well-written comedy that can have the same effect.
Right, so the blurred opening here is Toradora.
You find those few sacred gems and you...
Sacred gems. Look at how I word this. Sacred gems. You can see it underlying the psychology of an atheist here, that I'm calling high-quality art sacred. I guarantee you that was not on purpose when I was making the video. But the underlying psychology, in Japan, there's this subculture of a lot of anime are set in Japan. That's obvious, right? But a lot of locations in anime are actual locations you can go to in real life in Japan. And you have this whole subculture of Japanese people going to different places in Japan where their favorite anime took place in, right? And they call it a pilgrimage. They call it going to holy sites. So you can kind of see it there, right?
You jot them down as a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10 on my anime list, and you're having a lot of fun seeing the twists and turns the production team is bringing you on. And sometimes you'll even get a proper ending, though in this industry a proper ending is becoming rarer and rarer.
That's true.
As you watch, the memory of having to shift through the crap of media falls further and further to the back of your mind, and things are great.
That's a consumer brain, all right? That line just here was a total consumer brain, I don't care that I watched, 20 hours of crap. I just saw 1 hour that was pretty good. GG, buddy, GG.
And then it ends. The character plots achieve their resolutions. The end credits roll. The theme plays one last time. And then it's over. And suddenly, this world that you felt like you yourself had been immersed within these past 12 or 15 or 20 episodes is ripped from under you. It feels like waking up from a long dream that felt so real. Waking up and realizing you need to go to school or work, and that the house you bought with your wife never existed.
That was a thing that happened. That's I'm pulling from something that actually happened there. I think I once had a dream where I, like, got married and had a full-on life. And then I woke up. And then, like, when you wake up from that type of dream, that felt like it was, like, 7 years. You know, that's, But, anyway. I don't know why I'm blurry now. Oh, well, maybe I'm just blurry for the rest of the video. That might be a thing. This goes back to the difference between a consumer and how I see it now. It is good for good art to be immersive. It is good for you to get lost into that art. J.R.R. Tolkien talks about the purpose of art is, to some extent, is escapism. And what he talks about escapism, he says that we are living in a prison. Ever since the fall of man, the world is a prison. It's not just a prison. The world is not the way it should be. You know, we messed it up after the fall. So it is natural for the human being to not want to participate in this world because this world is fallen. This world is not what it's made to be, what it was made to be like. And our nature in its pre-fallen state, was not made for the fallen world we see around us. And so storytelling is places where we can see the logos, where we can see, you know, the possibilities of what could be, you know. He talks about this in his essay on fairy stories, which is really good, really fundamental to my philosophy on art these days. But escapism is the desire to escape this fallen world and to contemplate higher worlds through art. You know, that's the transcendental property of art, okay? In that, in order to facilitate this escapism, it is good for art to be immersive. We are talking about Tolkien. We're talking about the guy who spent years working on languages, on the deep lore of his worlds that he set his stories in, who made completely immersive worlds, right? Who was also a traditional Catholic, right? He had the traditional Christian worldview. He understood that art should be an escapism. And escapism is necessary. It's necessary to go back and sort of recover the virtues through the beauty of art, that we can then use those virtues in our lives, in our relationship with others. Okay? That's the big, important part. Now, for an atheist getting immersed into a world like this, then, like I sort of say here, it's like you're waking up from a dream. Your escapism, your immersion is over, and now you're back in this fallen world, which your nature is not meant to be part of. And, you know, what do you do there? If you have no hope, right? If you have no beliefs, it's going to become depressing. Versus when Tolkien, I imagine if Tolkien went through a similar experience, he would... Let's say we have a super otaku J.R.R. Tolkien who's getting really into Toradora, and he's really loving Toradora, and then Toradora finishes, it ends perfectly, and then, you know, the show ends. Well, Tolkien's not going to go, oh, Toradora's over, I see. I'm going to be sad now. No, Tolkien's going to say, wow, what a wonderful lesson in... you know, in love, in social relationships, in humanity. Excuse me. I'm going to take what I learned and try to embody those virtues in my romantic life, in my life with my friends. I'm going to see the self-sacrifice of... It's been a long time since I watched Toradora. When, what was his name? Yuji? When Yuji jumped into the river and then proposed to Taiga, you know, his selflessness in doing that, you know, I'm going to live with that selflessness for the people I love too. You know, you're going to take that, you know, when you do that, the art doesn't end. The art is still impacting you. And it's not really the art that's impacting you, the art is the medium. What it's the medium of, it's mediating the transcendental through it being a medium, through the art to you. Okay, it's taking transcendental values and virtues and funneling it into you, so long as you're open to receiving that. And then you take those into your daily lives, improve your life by doing that, by, you know, it's essentially a Christian life, you know, long story short. But there's this sort of idea that I think is prevalent a lot, especially in like American Protestantism, that Christianity is sort of this bracket thing we have here, and then everything else is in another bracket. It's the bracket we call the world, and we try to stay away from the world, and then we are only in Christianity, and we have to take Christianity, we have to take the Bible, we have to... it's why their art tends to be something like God's Not Dead or Left Behind, these very in-your-face, very, frankly, cheesy Christian media, versus while more traditional Christian art is going to be something like Dostoevsky. It's going to be something more like Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings, Tolkien talks about it being a fundamentally Catholic work, fundamentally religious work, but at no point in time in Lord of the Rings does, like, Samwise go over to Frodo and say, Frodo, you just didn't believe hard... I don't know what accent I'm doing. You didn't believe hard enough. The reason you keep putting on the ring is because you don't trust God. Like, that would feel very out of place in Lord of the Rings. But Lord of the Rings is doing a better job at being a actual Christian story, as in how a Christian tells a story, than, for example, the God's Not Dead movie. Right? Does that make sense? A lot of advice, Uncle... What's his name? I never watched the show. In Avatar The Last Airbender, the old uncle guy, Uncle Iroh, is that his name? He gives a lot of wisdom that coincides very well with Christianity, with Christian virtues, with Christian values. And in so much of the clips I've seen of him, Avatar The Last Airbender kind of does a better job at being a Christian show, even though it's filled with Buddhist imagery, right? In Taoist imagery. It does it in pagan imagery, frankly. It does it much better than, something more in your face like VeggieTales. Although, I like VeggieTales. Probably for more ironic reasons, but I like VeggieTales. Let's see. Right. What was I saying? Why am I talking about this?
Go to school.
You're right. So you need... But by living that life, the art doesn't end, right? Versus atheist nihilist, where the show is the show, and when the show ends, it's the end. You're never going to watch that show for the first time again, right? Versus someone with a more traditional, with a more Christian mindset, you're going to take what you've learned, and that show's always going to be with you. It's going to be with you in how you talk to people and how you relate to people. Now, I'm not talking about, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be like Naruto and say believe it and run in a Naruto style all the time, right? This is where, ultimately these virtues, the show is the medium and it's coming to you. What's coming to you isn't the show's values. It's not the show's virtues itself. All virtue, all value ultimately comes from God, right? In Orthodoxy, we have the concept of the uncreated energies of God, that the virtues are of God and are God, actually. But that they radiate throughout creation. And it's radiating into, for example, stories. And so stories are ways we can sort of receive that, so long as we're receptive to it, discerning, being able to know, recognize it for what it is. And to do that, we kind of need to live more Christian lives. And again, I should probably say here, I know I'm talking a lot about Christianity. This channel isn't necessarily a channel for me to talk about Christianity or anything. But, like, if I'm going to give my opinion on something and talk about what is true, I can only talk about it how I see it as true, which would be through a Christian framework. So I'm not, like, saying, guys, you have to be a Christian to watch anime correctly. I'm not... Although that might be true. But, my purpose isn't really to convince anyone to become Christian here on this channel. It's just... to present the way I see things, that's what YouTube's all about, right? My channel's about giving opinions and ideas, and here I am with a 5-year-old idea, and I'm critiquing that with how I see the world differently now. Right.
Or work, and that...
And when you do this, by the way, post-anime depression is just gone. Post-show depression is just gone. What post-anime depression is, what post-show depression is, my mom and sister told me to mention that they get post-K-drama depression. So I'll bring that up too, I guess. Post-K-drama depression. What that ultimately is nihilism what it ultimately is atheism, is what it is at its core. It's trying to put something into a hole that will not fill that hole. It's seeing this infinite hole and dropping something in there, and then, like, you know, it's an infinite hole, so you don't even hear a clunk, you know, 'cause there's no bottom to the hole. You have to fill that hole. And if you don't have God there, you're going to try, especially put art in there. And if you have God in there, well, then art sort of becomes, you know, a tool. It becomes an extra thing that helps you live a better life. Yeah. Let's move on.
You bought with your wife never...
You have hope. I know I keep pausing it. You have hope as a Christian. You know, you have hope in a better future. You know, blackpilling is heretical in Christianity. You can't blackpill. You can't think that the future is going to be terrible because, you know, in the end, God wins. Your goal is to just be on the winning side when you come to the end, right? That's what our goal is, and art is meant to help you with that. Even if the artists themselves aren't thinking about it through this lens. You know, I guess I should address this also. Christianity has the idea of the logos spermatikos, the idea of the logi, of the patterns of creation. All creation is ultimately participating in God's energies to different degrees, so that an atheist can produce a wonderful piece of art. You know, so let's make that clear as well. You don't have to be, like, consciously Christian to make good art.
Existed.
See St. Basil the Great's essay on the right use of Greek literature for the youth, where he says you should read things like Greek mythology, you know, pagan religion stuff that was around when he was alive. You know, he's living in a time period where there are pagans, people worshiping Zeus, and Christians at the same time, and he is telling people, you should probably read the Iliad and the Odyssey before you even touch the Bible, right? Which is... it might be going a little too far there, but the point is, you know, art starts even before Christianity.
Because it was in a dream. You have to give your brain a moment to adjust itself, to realize that what it had recognized as reality itself was gone, and that this vaguely familiar world is, in fact, the real one, even though the dream felt just as real. Frankly, it's a bit disturbing at how fast the brain can accept one reality existing instead of the other one it had accepted as being true beforehand.
This line in particular, by the way, is a riff on Fallout 4. There's a character in Fallout 4 who basically is who's trying to gaslight you into thinking you're an artificial robot. But it's a very interesting dialogue if you want to look up the, like, Fallout 4, is your character a synth debate.
But while the brain can get the fundamentals right, it takes a while for the trace elements of that reality to be gone. And with anime...
and again, with the Christian worldview, you don't want that to be gone, you want to incorporate it. You want to integrate it, to use Jungian terms, I guess. You want to be able to take what was good and move forward. St. Basil the Great talks about you need to be like a bee. You need to go to different types of art the way a bee would go to different flower and extract, what is it? How do bees work? The pollen, I guess. Pollen, honey, whatever. Extract the pollen from each flower you go to, and then use that pollen to create honey that enriches you, right? That's sort of the idea.
Sometimes you find that one that just does it.
And of course, as a nihilist at this point in time, as an atheist when I made this video, I don't believe in meaning in the world, and when you don't believe in meaning, when you don't believe that the world is structured, then there's no point in, like, the idea doesn't come to you to take good things from different pieces of art, integrate it into yourself, and live a better life. It just doesn't pop up in your head, because you think everything is random, everything is meaningless, ultimately. That's what random means. Everything is chance. I'm a bunch of atoms and cells clustered together. So, you know, the concept of good and better are ultimately social constructs, right? Tricks of the brain in and of themselves. This is why I think, you know, this is why I went into a different direction than Digibro did. I went into the direction of eventually saying, you know what, maybe meaning actually exists. maybe these aren't just delusions of the brain and meaning actually exists, and then I get put on the road eventually becoming a Christian where I am now, versus Digibro, who, really tied into, maybe the things that I think are good aren't actually good, and everything is very relative and subjective, and everything actually in all material reality too is subjective and relative. And then he went off and became transgender.
For you. And when it's over, you have to move on with your life. Consciously, you understand.
Notice that move on with your life. Once you finish the show, it's over and you move on with your life. But what I'm saying here is from a more Christian perspective, you don't just move on, you're not consuming a product. It's not like you eat a meal and go, and then move on, right? When you're consuming art, when you're appreciating art, when you're getting value from the art, you are living with those values. You are training yourself to live a more virtuous life, which is, the end goal. Well, actually the goal, not even end goal, the goal of how to live a Christian life.
Understand that everything was fictional and that they were all fictional characters in a fictional world feeling and saying things that were written on a page or word processor document.
Note the nihilism here. All this is fictional, it's not real. But the virtues and the values and the morals of stories actually are real. When you're dealing with fiction, when you're engaging with fiction, you're not engaging with something that's fake. You're engaging with the things that are real, which is virtue, morals, ethics, things like that, which, from a Christian perspective, is the uncreated energy of God, which is God, right? You are communing with God when you're communing with those things that are found, that are brought to you through the medium being art.
But subconsciously, one of the marks of a good fiction writer is making those characters feel real.
Right, yep. Notice the subconsciously, right? It's not real, but if it makes it feel real, that's a good artist, right? It's beyond that. A good fiction writer is able to help the realness come through, right?
Make the world feel lived in. This doesn't mean realistic, mind you. Just as you can get sucked into a gritty, cynical world where there is a police state that can monitor your health with science, you can get sucked up into a world with wizards and magic and cat fairies that can destroy the world.
This is kind of funny. This is correct, right? To make an immersive world, it doesn't have to be a realistic world. And I like how I word it like one is more real than the other, and here I am now, believing in wizards and magic and cat fairies that can destroy the world. What Tolkien talks about is, in order to create good immersive fiction, he calls it fairy, right? Which is funny how I bring up fairy as being fake here in this 2020 video. But Tolkien says that all good fiction takes place in the world of fairy. And what he means by fairy, he's using a very old Celtic definition of fairy here. He's talking about fairy as a world where man is in a precarious state, when man is facing risks, and when there's many different possibilities of danger but also solution, right? Any world like that is the world of fairy, and all good stories take place in the world of fairy, okay? What does that mean? When he's talking about on fairy stories, he's not talking about fairy tales. He's not talking about fantasy stories. Star Wars could fit the term fairy. Breaking Bad could fit the term of fairy, right? Yeah.
But the characters still feel like people that would exist in such a world, and consistent rules of world building can make a fictional world feel just as navigable, if not more navigable, than your own hometown.
Yes, and this is interesting. I'm kind of thinking of making a video about this. I mentioned world building there. Tolkien is like the OG world builder. Fiction before Tolkien didn't really have world building that much. You can say maybe Dante, but I think the best way to understand Dante is that Dante was having a mystical experience. I don't think Dante was necessarily building up a world with his poetry. I think he was writing something he kind of, in some way, shape, or form, saw. I don't think Dante is the best example of a world builder. I think Tolkien is probably the best first example. Tolkien definitely has his own influences, George MacDonald, for example. But world building as we know it today is a Tolkien thing, right? The idea that a fictional world can be that immersive is ultimately an idea coming from Tolkien. Fiction before Tolkien didn't really do it to that scale. And then we have to remember, what's the point in doing that? What's the point in world building? What's the point in doing this deep, immersive world? Well, let's ask the person who invented world building, J.R.R. Tolkien, why did you do it? And he'll tell you, because the world needs to be immersive to help you escape from the fallen state of mankind and the world as it is now, to allow you to engage more clearly with the virtues of God and bring that into the living world. Something to think about.
At the same time that reality
We don't world build for the sake of world building.
is being ripped from you, you have to adapt with the new real reality. Namely, the hardest things to face are how you'll never have as much of an interesting life in the real world as you saw in the fictional world, though this could be because of larger issues like the lack of self-fulfillment.
The lack of self-fulfillment. That's there's a lot that can be said here. So I talk about, you have to sort of cope with the fact that now you're in the real world and it's not going to be as interesting as the fictional world. A few things here. What you are feeling when you finish a show and are going back to the real world is actually you're leaving the real world for this fake world that's become a disillusioned world. Or rather an illusioned world, I should say. The world as it is right now is not how the world is supposed to be. Right? This world we see around us is not the world God had originally intended to make. If anything, we get more of the real world, the world God had intended to make, through art. Through the fictional world we were just engaged in. There is more, that we could say that the Toradora anime world is more like God's original intended creation for the world than the world around us right now. Okay? Which is interesting to think. And when you live a life like this, when you live a life like the Christian life, it becomes, people are talking about re-enchantment. Although Scott Mannion will talk about how enchantment's kind of the wrong way to look at it. Really, you're disenchanting yourself of the enchantment that is modernity. But for the sake of argument, re-enchantment, reactivating your senses of how the world actually is, developing the Christian mindset, or at the very least a traditional mindset of the world. We're not in a cause and effect chain of being. We're not in a cause and effect relationship world. We're not in a world where everything is subjective. We're not in a world where everything is atoms. We are in a world that is being written by the writer that all writers participate in. There's a fire truck going out. What else can be said? I've been thinking when I converted to Christianity and living a life as a Christian, I feel like in many ways my life is more exciting and more almost anime-esque than it's ever been. Not just through changing my perspective, but through how things have been happening in my life. I was talking with one of my friends, and he told me, like, dude, your life has become an anime. So much things happening in your life has become more anime. And it's not just because I live in Japan now. But life just becomes better. It becomes more like the fictional shows in a good way. I don't want to kind of say this in a Bugman way, in a consumer way, in a weeb way, and, running down the hallways Naruto running way. Not in a pretend way, but in a real way, life becomes different. And here, I should also highlight, maybe the reasons you don't have an interesting life is because you have the lack of self-fulfillment. As if the self can fulfill you. Right? If fulfillment suggests that something's empty and you need to fill it, right? So something's empty. Where is that emptiness? It's going to be in yourself. Self-fulfillment? You're going to fill that hole in yourself with yourself? Good luck. Good luck, brother. Let me take this bowl and try to fill the bowl with the bowl. That's a very loud quote thing, but that's not how self-fulfillment isn't a thing. That's not a thing that exists. You don't fulfill yourself. It goes back to what I was saying. Materialists have a God-sized hole. Atheists have a god-sized hole. Nihilists have a god-sized hole inside of them. And that's bad news because God is infinite. I'm dying. You don't fulfill yourself with yourself. Okay.
But for a more universal feeling, that is of knowing that you have to go back into piles and piles of crap to do more shifting in order to find another
sifting,
diamond in the
probably.
rough. And you know what? That diamond might be a diamond. It might be another great world with great characters, themes.
And by the way, the blurred anime opening here is Kaguya-sama, Love is War. But here I go again, talking about throwing things into that hole. Oh, man. I have found the perfect anime. Let me take that perfect anime and drop it into the infinite hole, and oh, there it goes. And we still have an infinite hole. So I guess I have to find more art, more art, more art. And here I am being blinded and guideless throughout all the art that I'm searching for. And then I'm dropping it into the hole, and it's crap, so I don't think it's going to fill the hole. But here is another good anime. But the anime I just watched was better, but whatever. Let me drop it into the hole. Oh, it's gone. Because I'm not holding on to the art. I'm not taking anything from the art and integrating it into myself. You don't stick it into the hole. You don't put it in the God hole, right? God goes in the God hole. Okay? And then art, you take art, and art is, you take the I've said this 5 times by now. Take the virtues from the art, integrate it into yourself. You haven't lost the anime, right? You don't need to find something new. You really don't need to find anything, but that's another thing, okay? And then always comparing it. Notice how this is a process that will lead to just utter despair and depression, hence the title Post-Anime Depression, right? This is not a good cycle. This is not a mentally healthy cycle. This is not a mentally healthy way of engaging with art.
Development, etc. But it still might not be as shiny as the diamond you had just found. And suddenly, though you're watching a wonderful show, you can still feel inside you that it's not as good as your #1 favorite.
And you want to find something better than your #1 favorite because your #1 favorite, you were hoping that was going to fill the hole, but then it doesn't fill the hole. So you need to find something. Then it's gone once it's in the hole. So you need to find something even better. And even when you find something good, you're like, you're not as good as the previous one. And then you drop it into the hole. It doesn't fill the hole. If you find something better, it's still not going to fill the hole. You see the problem, right?
In some situations, you watch through so much crap and get a few diamonds, and then find that a new diamond that even compares to some of your favorites are rarer and rarer to find, and it can put you off on furthering the search. Maybe you just found the best show that has ever been made and ever will be made for you, and there's not much of a point in searching further. Looking at the statistics of my own anime watching,
versus, keep in mind when you're watching, when you're interacting with art and integrating the virtues, it doesn't necessarily matter that it's better or worse than previous things you've seen. What matters is, it's training. You might have the greatest workout of all time, but that doesn't mean when you go to the next workout and think, oh, it's not as bad as my previous workout, and then you stop, right? It's training. It's training the heart. It's training the virtues. It's training us for our ultimate reason, the ultimate meaning of life, which is theosis. It is communion with God. And we do that by walking in His way, right? Which is why art helps us. This is part of the reason why art exists. So it doesn't necessarily matter that you've consumed the greatest piece of content and now nothing. I guess we should just stop watching content. You train what you can train.
not only very rarely watch currently running shows, I watch very little anime in general past a certain point, as my top anime list had pretty much been solidified, and nothing I was finding compared to them.
That's true.
Every now and then I find something that was close. Kaguya-sama Love is War might have made me laugh a lot and fall in love with its characters, but the daily lives of high school boys was still funnier.
That's a good show.
Re:Zero dragged me in with its suspense and perfect music cues, but
that's a good show with a read the manga ending.
Still think Attack on Titan soundtrack has it beat.
Attack on Titan's pretty good.
It took me a while for me to realize that the writer of one of my favorite romance anime, Toradora,
And I have Golden Times opening in the background now.
Created another story in the form of Golden Time, and I watched that a few years ago and felt that it was a very well put together show and easily ranks high up for me in the genre. But Toradora is still better.
Right. Both of the shows are good. Toradora is better, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch Golden Time. Golden Time's pretty good.
Golden Time was just a bit more relatable for a college student. I loved Gundam 00 for its politics and battles and huge cast of diverse characters, but I feel that Code Geass is simply much better organized and better at conveying themes with a cast that's more relatable to me personally.
Code Geass is one of the greats. Code Geass, I would put Code Geass up there with, like, you know, that's a must-watch anime. If you're wanting to get into anime, you must watch Code Geass. That is a top-level show.
I should note that what makes an anime good or bad is really centered on you, the viewer, and where you are right now in your life.
To an extent, that's true. To an extent, that's false. What makes a good anime, it's a two-way street. One, the anime, the writers, the creators, the creator of any art piece is participating in the energies of God, whether they know it or not. And you participate in the good in degrees, okay? So there's that. If you participate as a creator in higher degrees, it's going to be better. If you participate in lower degrees, it's going to be not as good. Then, as the viewer, you have to be in a situation where you can understand the art, appreciate the art, and then you're going to be able to participate in that in degrees. That is basically going to be the other side of the street of how what makes good art, I guess.
Sometimes an anime can be the perfect anime for you at where you are in your life right now, with things more like relatable characters and interesting themes. But
yeah, certain lessons need to be learned at certain times. That's also an aspect to it.
As time goes on and you change and the situation around you changes, theme and characters that never appealed to you before suddenly become the key reasons why you like certain shows. Regardless, the things I just described all feed into a concept I've seen called post-anime depression. The feeling as if nothing can compare to what you just watched, while accepting that you're back to your endless search for something good. All
I think we've addressed all this.
Readjusting to having finished a world with nothing more to consume. There's nothing from that world for you to see for the first time, which is a different feeling than simply rewatching a show. Often,
here we have Higurashi no Nakokoro ni, this is season 2, I think it's Kai. That's another high-quality anime. I should rewatch that at some point.
I find myself rewatching a show to try to capture the feelings of what I felt when I first saw the show, but in the end, it's the difference between looking at a photograph of you and being in that exact time and place when that photograph was taken.
Right, I guess I should... this video has gone so much longer than I expected it to be. Congratulations to you if you're still in this video. Right. This is the difference between sensation and actual art, actual quality art, art being consumed as a medium. I don't like the C word, but whatever. Sensations, which, you know, in Christianity is connected to the passions, ultimately, connected to sin if abused, that is only going to be appealing the first time, and then the second time you're going to want a bigger hit, right? That's sort of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about, oh, you'll never experience the same anime for the first time more than the first time. Which makes sense from a nihilistic, atheistic perspective. When you are analyzing art more from the traditional Christian approach, then it doesn't necessarily become different the first versus the second time. Like I kind of said, you're kind of able to predict the way a story's going to go once you sort of develop that Christian mindset. I think about the scriptures. The scriptures are read constantly in the life of a Christian. You are going to be rereading the same things over and over and over again. Especially if, for example, if you have a prayer rule like I do, where I pray from the Book of Common Prayer. I pray morning prayer, evening prayer, and then in my afternoon prayer I read the assigned scripture readings of the day from the Church of Antioch. Okay? So what that looks like is if you know the Book of Common Prayer, morning and evening office, both of those offices include at least two readings each. So you have the first lesson, the second lesson. One would be Old Testament, the next would be New Testament. Evening prayer, same thing. You'd have an Old Testament reading and a New Testament reading. And then for the daily readings from the church, you would have a epistle reading and a gospel reading. Well, if you're doing that every single day, you're going to be rereading things a lot, right? And it's not like, oh man, this is the third time I've read Jesus being crucified, and it's just not as thrilling as it used to be, right? The reason we are dealing with art is to help us with our lives. It's to help train us in the virtues. Art, by attending to art, you're getting something out of art, okay? It's not about the sensation. It's not about the first time, being this special time you're watching a piece of art. If anything, you're going to be able to get more out of it the second, third time, right? You're going to notice things you didn't notice before. That's the beauty of art, that it keeps giving, right? It's not like a painting where someone looks at a painting and goes, wow, and then they never look at it again. Think about people putting paintings up in their homes, right? It's not like you put up a painting of a Leonardo da Vinci, you put that up, you look and go, wow, there's a lot to think about when I look at this art, and then you take it down and put it in the attic because you've already looked at it once, right? No, we put art on the wall so we can continually be looking at it. It's the same thing with anime, for example. We get more out of it the more we attend to it. Right.
I haven't seen many people talking about post-anime depression or post-show depression, so I thought I'd just take a moment to reflect upon it in this video, and I hope you found anything I said relatable, as all anime fans continue our endless search for something good.
As all anime fans continue our endless search for something good. There's you see the subtlety here, right? That 2020 Radix is sort of locked in this endless cycle, right? I have thrown myself into an eternity of an endless cycle of consuming crap and feeling sad. An eternity of sorrow. This is what Christianity is talking about when it's talking about hell. Post-anime depression, post-show depression, post-content depression is literally hell. That's what Christianity is talking about. When you don't follow the virtues, when you're not living by the logos, you have put yourself into hell, and you will put yourself into hell in different ways, and this is how I was putting myself through hell as an atheist, right? As not living, in the Christian tradition, right? Not living in an ordered, hierarchical, structured life, but by living a chaotic life, a non-ordered life, where hierarchy was a social construct view of life, and art was the only transcendental that we could get meaning from. I've put myself into hell, right? It's very interesting that I've worded things I did in this video, because I feel like if I looked at this script, I would feel like I was creating a straw man of an atheist. But here I am literally being a straw man.
Some of us end our search realizing that it will be in vain, but it's a struggle that comes with loving anime or even just fiction, as I felt similar feelings to books, comics, movies, or TV shows. But
it doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be. There is another way. Please read my essay, 2020 Radix. Read my essay on icons to Funko Pops, or franchise fiction to Slot Pipeline, or please wait a few years and watch my How to Be a Fan and Not a Consumer video.
That's part of the feeling of being a fan. And this pain and emptiness we feel after ending a good show is...
And this is, ironically, the anime opening blurred here is The World God Only Knows, which is an interesting title for the theme of this video.
The mark of great fiction.
pain and emptiness we feel after an ending a good show is the mark of great fiction. Why would I want to read great fiction after hearing that statement? Oh man, this book's so good. You will feel pain and emptiness after you read it. Oh, this show's so great. You will fall into a state of depression. Right? That's not what good things do. That's not what good things do. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that thing is bad. It means you're probably engaging with it in a bad way.
I suppose my only advice is to be glad that you got to enjoy and experience it for the first time, and enjoy shows you love to the fullest while watching it for the first time. Because you can't...
There is some wisdom in that, but, you know, read it in the context of everything else I've said in this video.
Watch something for the first time, a second time.
Yeah, that's how first time works.
That's going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is...
Okay, right. This video has gone on way too long. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just wanted to make this video to put my thoughts out here on why I disagree with this old 2020 video, this 5-year-old video that I put out, you know, from my perspective yesterday. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. Leave them in the leave your comments in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Check out my social media for updates, and have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.